All right, moving on. Some of the biomes that we could discuss have been so influenced by humans that we've really changed them. So the explosion of human populations has altered landforms, biomes, climate, and species interactions. Some people go as far as saying that we're in a new geologic era called the Anthropocene. Not everyone agrees on that. 75% of the ice-free Earth is influenced by humans, and we do this through farming, through logging, through urban development, invasive species, and pollution. You can see here a picture of the eastern United States, and the different colors represent different anthropogenic biomes, things like cities, villages, rangelands, croplands, some semi-natural areas, and some and very few wildlands. We're going to move on to aquatic biomes. So there are four key physical factors when we're talking about aquatic biomes. There's salinity, so how steep a salinity gradient is there. Saline conditions are osmotically stressful. So as you learn more about osmosis, you'll learn about osmotic stress. Water depth is a key factor because it limits light availability, which can influence how productive these aquatic biomes can be. Water flow, so that can influence the organisms that need to survive in water and how much oxygen is available, and nutrient availability, which can limit the growth of things like algae and other organisms. So the picture about the light shows you different wavelengths of light that are available underwater, and you can see that most of the wavelengths of light that are available underwater are in the blue and green wavelengths, and that red wavelengths are not very available underwater. And that's why if you are a diver and you go underwater, everything looks blue eventually. And the only way you can see the beautiful colors of coral reefs is to bring your own flashlight, because your flashlight is a full spectrum light. And when you use it to shine underwater, then all of a sudden those colors are reflected back into your eyes because they're not available. Those wavelengths of light are not available underwater. Nutrient availability in the oceans in particular can be influenced by upwelling. So upwelling is when we have wind blowing across the surface, which moves water away from the shore. And then that is able to pull nutrient-rich water from the very bottom of the ocean up onto the shore. And these upwelling areas are super nutrient rich, often quite cool waters. We have a lot of upwelling on our Western Washington shores. We have lakes and ponds. So here's a couple ponds or lakes from around here. And what you can see are the different zones of a lake or a pond. So we have the littoral zone is the zone along the edge of the pond. We have the limnetic zone, which is out in deeper water away from the edge. And the limnetic zone can be broken into the photic zone. It's the zone of water that light penetrates through, and the aphotic zone, which is basically the water that doesn't receive much light at all. And then the benthic zone is the term we use for anything living or growing along the bottom of the lake. So you'll see these terms again. And what's really interesting about lakes is that some lakes mix, most lakes mix. There are some lakes that are called meromictic lakes that don't mix at all. In fact, Eastern Washington has quite a few meromictic lakes. I'll talk about that in a minute. But lake turnover is a really important phenomenon. So in the wintertime, where it's cold and icy, sometimes you get an ice cap on the lake, and that keeps the water from mixing. It's called stratification, winter stratification. And so you get this cold at the surface, and actually the water warms up as it moves down. So most water that's not frozen solid is the coldest it can get is about 4 degrees Celsius. And so in wintertime, you get warmer conditions actually near the bottom of the lake. And because the ice floats to the surface because of the properties of water, that means that the lake itself doesn't freeze solid and organisms can live in it all year long. Then in the springtime, when the ice melts and you get wind blowing across the surface, that pushes the water and it turns it over. It mixes it all together. And so you get this nice mixing in the spring called spring turnover. The water warms to about 4 degrees C or warmer. And basically water sinks and nutrients come up and everything gets mixed. And in the summertime, things usually calm down and you get warm water at the surface because the sun heats it up. So now you get summer stratification. You have warm water at the surface and what's called a thermocline, which is the change in temperature as you move down. And you still get about 4 degrees C at the bottom and higher nutrients. And so the dense water at the bottom becomes nutrient rich. The water near the surface becomes oxygenated. And then in the fall, as that thermocline breaks down and the water cools down, it mixes once again in fall turnover. So these would be called dimictic lakes, mixing twice a year. Lakes that don't freeze just mix once a year. So they have summer stratification, and then they kind of mix throughout the winter, in fall, winter, and spring, and then they get stratified again in the summer. And then lakes that don't mix at all are lakes that typically have a really steep chemocline. So they have something causing the water at the top or the bottom to be very distinct chemically that keeps that stratification happening year round. Streams and rivers function in different ways. So here we have a picture of the Hoh. What happens with a stream is as you start in the mountains, you have what are called headwater streams, little tiny trickles, cascades, waterfalls, things coming down. So you have really steep slope, and that changes as you move downstream and the slope flattens out towards the ocean. Other things that change is you tend to have big bouldery rocks in the headwaters, and those rocks get smaller and smaller and turn into sand as you make it to the ocean. So those two things decrease as you move downstream. Other things increase. So channel width, depth, and to some degree, and definitely discharge, which is how much water is flowing. All of those increase as you move from the headwaters down. So you have bigger streams, they're carrying more water, they're moving more sediment. You have more sediment. The only thing that really doesn't change much as you move down from the mountains out to near the ocean is velocity. It's about the same all the way throughout a stream. We don't see a lot of change in velocity as we move downstream. So these kind of changes as you move downstream are called the river continuum concept. And because these physical factors are changing, organisms change as you move downstream as well. And so we're not going to talk about the specifics of that. Wetlands are another type of aquatic biome. They are often connected to rivers and lakes, sometimes ponds. They're basically parts of landscapes that are wet for year-round or parts of the year. There are different types of wetlands, things like marshes versus swamps versus bogs versus wet meadows and vernal pools. But most wetlands work in a similar way. They dissipate stream energy, they slow the water down, sediments fall down to the bottom, contaminants are filtered out, they provide critical habitat, and then the water that leaves wetlands tends to be cleaner and clearer. So they perform a very important role on the landscape. And beaver have been able to, where they're reintroduced, recreate wetlands and improve water quality. Estuaries are formed at the mouths of rivers, and they tend to be where sediment is dumped out. So here's a picture from the Everglades estuary, a really massive estuary system. The other pictures are pictures of the Elwha River. In 2011, prior to dam removal, there was a very small estuary at the mouth of the Elwha River. But after the dam was removed in 2014, a lot of the sediment that was built up behind, actually there are 2 dams on the Elwha River, built up behind those 2 dams, has been moved out and created this beautiful new estuary at the mouth of the Elwha River. And here you can see a picture of it in 2016. Here's some pictures over time. You can see how the sediment has moved out and changed and shifted. This is a really neat kind of time series showing you this is all new land. So new land that's been formed at the mouth of the river and belongs to the Elwha, the lower Elwha Clallam tribe. So the ocean has similar zonation that we saw for lakes. We have what's called an intertidal zone, really close to the edge. That's the zone that's influenced by the tides. Then we have, instead of the littoral zone, we have a neritic zone in the ocean. And instead of the, I can't remember. Instead of the other zone in lakes, we have what's called the oceanic zone. Again, the oceanic zone is broken into the photic zone and the aphotic zone, and the bottom of the ocean is called the benthic zone. So some similarities, but some differences too. We also have a lot of water on Earth is locked up and moving very slowly in the groundwater system. Here you can see different aquifers and how water might move and join onto a stream. Under a stream, when you walk up to the edge of a stream, you see water flowing there. That is part of the stream, but actually the stream extends quite a ways in all directions underneath the sediment in what's called the hyperrheic zone. Basically functions as a refrigerator for the stream. And so there's water moving through the sediments much faster than it moves through the groundwater, but slower than it moves through the stream. And that water is interchanged up and down with the stream water, keeping streams much cooler than they would without the hyperrheic zone and serving as refuges for organisms. Here you can see a picture of the largest aquifer in North America called the Ogallala Aquifer. And unfortunately, it's used quite extensively for irrigation and drinking water. And so a lot of it is depleted. You can see the red zones are depleted and the yellow zones will be depleted by 2050. We need to be careful of extracting too much water from the ground because it's a finite resource. And I would say water on Earth itself is finite. We call ourselves the blue planet, but if you take all the water and ball it up, it's a very small ball. So it's not actually, most of the planet is brown, right? It's rock, and the water is a thin film over the surface of our planet. So I think it's almost irresponsible to think of our planet as the blue planet. You can see all of the water on Earth in that little blue ball, and then all of the unfrozen fresh water in the smaller ball, and all of the fresh water in lakes and rivers in the nearly minuscule ball that you can probably barely see. So we really need to take care of water, and water pollution is a major problem. The water on Earth, 97.3% is salt water. 2.7% is fresh, but 2.14% of that fresh water is locked up as ice, and we want to keep it as ice, right? A very small amount, 0.001% is in the atmosphere. Quite a large percentage of the unfrozen fresh water is in the ground. Very small amount is in the soil, kind of on top of the groundwater. And then we have 0.008% in saline lakes, 0.009% in freshwater lakes, and only 0.0001% of the water on Earth is in rivers, which is why I study rivers, because they are fragile, important ecosystems that need to be taken care of.